Welcome in the Daily Destroyer DFS show, part of the Dynasty Warzone Network. This is me, Tyler, and Lou, breaking down the Week 10 slate, main slate on DraftKings. We're going to jump right in today, folks. It's going to be a tough slate. Not a lot of obvious answers out there. I'm sure we'll get down to the nitty gritty as we start burning through positions like we always do. Let's start with quarterbacks. Lou, let's do like we always do here and think about some of these quarterbacks at the top. But let's omit Kyler just because I'm not sure if he plays. It's not really worth talking about. But three quarterbacks that I think are gonna at least have some decent ownership and people are gonna be looking for is Josh Allen at 79, Herbert at 73, and Prescott at 69. Your thoughts on these three higher end quarterbacks? Ones you like, ones you're fading. What you got?
Yeah, they're all in pretty good spots. I think it's going to come down to what the rest of your lineup is. And for me, I'd love to get Josh Allen in if possible. He's 7,900, but he's against the Jets. And it's kind of a bounce back spot for him. Last week against the Jaguars, we saw like the Bills, they didn't even get a touchdown in that game. He threw a couple of picks. He also fumbled. And I think this is just more of like a get right spot for him. Still on the road, but I mean, it's against the Jets, a team that just loves to give up fantasy points in general. So I think it's a good spot for Josh Allen. I'm likely going to end up with Dak Prescott, mostly because he's $1,000 cheaper than Allen.
Very fair.
Also in a pretty decent spot against
it's going to be the theme of tonight, player in decent spot.
Yeah, that's the thing this week is like there's so many players in good spots that aren't really overpriced. Dak's still under 7K, and he just each week it seems like he's a decent form right now. The yards have been kind of all over the place, but he's had multiple touchdowns in 5 straight games. He's thrown a few more picks recently, but he hasn't had a game with more than one pick in the same game. But he's back. He seems like he's more likely to be healthy this week after last week. They had that loss, so he's also in a bounce back spot. They're going to be at home, which I think is probably a good thing for him as well. And he pretty much has a floor of 20 points. He has that one game against Chargers, which we'll talk about this a little bit later, but the Chargers are pretty tough defense to face, and he's against the Falcons this week, so it's going to be a little easier.
Yeah, 100% with you on that one. And then one quarterback, we talked a little bit before the show, and drop it down the list a bit. And as we get into those positions, Lou and myself, at least have now in our cash lineups, have found ourselves needing to pay down at that quarterback position. And when we are deciding to pay down, one of the names that stands above is Taylor Henneke at 54 in a matchup against Tampa Bay. We do know this is likely going to be a high-scoring affair, and that the Tampa Bay is not very good against the pass. So it does lend itself well to Taylor Henneke. He's been, started off the season hot. Things have not been great, but I would like to note, he does have a little bit of a rush floor. He's rushing more than you think, and currently he is 6th in the NFL in quarterback rush yards, which isn't saying a ton. But at the same time, like he could rush 7-8 times for 40 yards, which does have a little bit of floor. Just through touchdowns. And, if he can hit 14, 15 DK points, I think we're in a good spot considering what we're looking to do with the rest of the lineup. Thoughts on Heineke?
Yeah, I think if you're going to pay down, he's probably my favorite. We'll talk about this, but there's a lot of higher end wide receivers that are in play, and then we have some savings at running back, but also high priced running back. So there's a lot of players in good spots that are higher priced. So I wouldn't be surprised if some people find themselves wanting to pay down a little bit this week at quarterback, but there's also not that many great options. But with Heineke's rushing floor and in a game environment that I think tends towards having maybe more garbage time and more fantasy points just in general.
Yeah, 51 point over under. Yep, against two teams that are bad against the pass.
So it seems like the type of spot which, if you're going to pay for 5,200 for someone, like you said, like you probably only need like 15 points from him to not really be hurt, assuming that the other plays in your lineup do well. Especially for something like cash, like maybe in GPPs, you're going to need more than 15, but I think he has the upside to get higher. We've seen it a few times this year.
Mm.
The other guy I was looking at, kind of cheaper, is Carson Wentz.
Yep.
I heard
like the
that
call.
his wife is due sometime soon. So
Could be on
depending
game
on
day. Are
that,
we doing a baby narrative here?
opposite that he might not end up playing.
I thought
heard.
he said he was going to play no matter what, man.
Oh, okay. So if he's gonna play no
He
matter
might have
what,
been
then it
joking,
doesn't
but I'm
matter.
almost certain Wentz said that he's playing regardless. I'm like, that's probably not the
Okay.
smartest move for the baby, but hey, here we go.
Okay, so yeah, then he's not like the sexiest play, but he's got 6 straight games with multiple touchdowns. He back-to-back games with 3 touchdowns. They've been
He's
throwing the
figuring it
ball
out a
at an
bit. He's
okay
figuring.
clip.
Yep.
But they're facing the Jaguars. Like that's like the big kicker here. It's the type of matchup that is probably good for a guy like Wentz, and he's got a pretty good ratio. He's 17 touchdowns to 3 interceptions this year, so he hasn't really been turning the ball over much. And he's the type of guy that if I'm going down, like I feel pretty comfortable because I have players that I can load up with. And we'll talk about it later, but I think Jonathan Taylor is going to be decently high owned this week. So having a stack with Wentz is also going to be pivoting off the Taylor more so chalk. So I kind of like going Wentz as well. What do you think about him?
I do like Wentz. I think it's between him and Heineke. I personally don't have what the $500 to get up from Heineke to Wentz, but at the same time, I'm all in on Wentz. I'm starting him in multiple season longs. It's a good matchup. It was a little bit of a rough and rocky start for Wentz, but to be expected. It's a new team. He was dealing with a foot injury. There's issues on the offensive line. Didn't have a lot of time to build some rapport with those wide receivers. And now, looks like him and Pittman got their things figured out. Pittman's been lighting the world on fire. O-line's healthier. Wentz is looking good. He's settled in. So, I believe Wentz is that 20-point floor kind of guy probably going forward here.
Yeah, and it's the same type of thing there. We're not saying that he's going to get 30 points or anything like that. That's something that would be nice if he hit it. But at the same time, he's pretty locked into getting you in that 18 to 25 range, which I think is pretty solid for the 5,900.
Any other quarterbacks you'd like to talk about before we move to running backs?
I feel like an interesting play this week, which I don't know if I want to do it or not, but Russell Wilson's back.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the best game environment,
and not the best price either at 67
on the road. Yeah, if he was 6,200, I think I'd have more interest in him. But this is more of a big field, Millie Maker type play, where
because this could be a slow game
him coming back.
This could be a slow game, but they could also, we know what Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers are capable of.
And Russell Wilson doesn't really throw the ball all that much, but he's very efficient as a passer. The first game this season, he had only 23 pass attempts, but he had 4 touchdowns in that game.
He does this every year.
Yeah, so he has the upside any week, and you're probably gonna get him at the lowest ownership ever this week. So he's just sort of interesting to me. I don't know if I'm gonna do it, but if I wanted to stack up that game and do something a little off the board, I think he's somewhat interesting. Don't love the price, but it's pivoting off of Prescott, and then you have a similar price in there. And then on the other side, depending on what happens with Aaron Rodgers is probably going to determine a whole lot of things in that game. It seems like he's expected to play, but I mean, you never know. I think he still has to get a confirmed test before Sunday. So we'll see what happens in that game in general. It could just be a terrible game and completely avoid it. But I also wouldn't be surprised if Rodgers or Russell Wilson ended up being the highest scoring quarterback on the week. So
agreed. Pool of 3 QBs, Lou.
For me, it's just Allen, Prescott, and Heineke. We didn't talk about Herbert really, but I like him as well.
Gonna like a lot of guys, but we're gonna have to take some stands this week, man. That's just how it's gonna go. Over to the running back position, I think the two guys that are obviously we got to talk about that everyone's going to be at least thinking about is Dernis Johnson at 47 and Mark Ingram at 45. Both these guys are going to walk right into a lot of volume. Dernis Johnson, we've already seen it once this year, and he looked great. I mean, Dernis Johnson, I think, surprised a lot of people with how good he looked. Chubb's already been ruled out. Hunt is on IR. Was this? Demetric Felton's out. I think John I don't even know if they're going to have a backup running back in this one. So the ownership on Dernis Johnson's about to be absolutely insane, but you're going to have him. And if he misses, you're likely fine too, because everyone else is going to have him. Mark Ingram, probably a little more interesting, but also likely the second highest owned here. A bit dusty, but in this case, Kamara is out. 18 touches, 20 touches for Mark Ingram against the Titans, who they have been better as of late, but still not as good. And to be completely honest, the Titans' pass defense has been what's been impressive. And we know this New Orleans Saints team is one of the most run-heavy offenses in the NFL. So I personally think we'd see some Taysom Hill. This isn't a DFS thing, but I think we could be seeing a decent amount of Mark Ingram out of necessity in this one. So 47, Dernis Johnson, 45, Mark Ingram. Additional thoughts? Agree, disagree?
Yeah, I think because of price, these are two 4K running backs who are going to be workhorses this week. And in that sense, for cash, it just makes a lot of sense to play them both. We're going to talk about it as well, but there's a lot of guys in that like 6-7K range in other positions and even running back that are in good spots this week. So it's a way to save money. I think you're going to see a lot more 3 running back builds this week than we've seen in a few past weeks. We've had like double tight end and things like that. For me, between the two, I lean to Ernest. Most of that has to just do with not to like say the age model or anything, but he's just been more explosive of a back this year in general. And it's kind of interesting to look at it this way, but for Ernest, I think he's more likely to get that like 100 yards and a touchdown or something.
Yes.
But
Ingram,
I wouldn't be surprised if Ingram gets multiple touchdowns with like 40 yards, which ends up being about the same in fantasy point number. But
I'm with you.
The other side of it is like, I don't expect Ingram to really be too active in the passing game.
I agree. I would agree. No, I would not. I would not expect him to be that active. I mean, I think there's a world where he, catches 3 or 4 balls maybe, but not for much yardage.
Yeah. And I mean, not that Ernest really had much of that either, but we had in the past, like, was that last year? At one point in time when he was just like Chubb's backup, he has had games where he was the passing back. So in that sense, like I could see him getting 3-4 catches, maybe not anything like too spectacular, but at the end of the day, I feel like his ceiling is higher because his the upside of yards is probably higher with him because he's more likely to get like a 60-yard touchdown or something like that. And then for Ingram, he doesn't really have much of a backup. Taysom could take away like the touchdown or 2, things like that. But then it's Dwayne Washington who's his backup,
and he's not a pass catcher. I mean, we could see some. Is Ty Montgomery around still? Like I don't even know, man.
I don't think Ty Montgomery's there. It was that. Well, here's the issue: is they had that Tony Jones Jr. guy, but then he went to the IR.
No,
this would have been a great.
Ty Montgomery's still there. Ty Montgomery's still there, but
he's listed as wide receiver.
Yep.
Okay. So
fair enough.
Oh, so yeah, so he would playing on the team. He might get some of those, but
that's my thought.
You can't play him at running back, which I don't know if that really matters as much for
not
DFS.
Here. It does not.
But that could take away from Ingram.
But we're not playing Ingram for his pass work. Like that is not why he's in our lineup. So
right. But that's where I come back to. I think Dernis has the higher upside of yards, and you're really playing Ingram. If one over the other, your reasoning is that Ingram's more likely to get touchdowns. Like they're in a pretty decent spot against the Titans. Like they still have Trevor Siemian as the quarterback. So it's just both spots aren't like perfect, or they're not like that great either. And one way that you've been able to beat the Patriots has been through the run. So if you're going to take it as like position based and like defense against, Dernis is in a better spot. But I don't know. I'm probably playing both, but I think in tournaments you only want to play one or the other. Like I think it'll be better to pay up in 2 running back spots, or have like a mid range running back. If you're going to do that in tournaments, but in cash, you probably just play both.
Well, things are interesting here at running back because no one, I think, is necessarily overpriced. I don't think there's a lot of running backs here that are underpriced at this point that we've not talked about. They're in good spots, in good matchups. So I'm just going to throw some names out where I think if, like you said, hey, I'm interested in this guy, I would agree with you. But my challenge to you, Lou, is for you to pick 2 of these guys that you're going to take a stand on. So Najee Harris at 79, Jonathan Taylor at 81, DeAndre Swift 68, Eckler 76, CMC 84, Dalvin 8, Aaron Jones 69. There is a lot of good plays, usually in the same range. But when I go through those names with pricing involved, sure, we'll start with one. Like, what is the one guy out of those kind of elite territory running backs that you're interested in playing that you think is going to stand above the rest?
I think the safest for me is Najee. Facing the Lions, Claypool is out. He gets, and this is more of like a DraftKings thing where you get the point per reception. I think the likelihood of Najee catching 5 balls in this game is pretty decent, and he's been getting at least 20 carries each game as well. He hasn't been super efficient as a runner. That's my biggest issue with him is, yeah, he's getting 20 carries, but 20 carries isn't leading to 100 rush yards. And that's really where you would see a differentiator in this range. But I think his downside risk is way lower than others, especially in a spot against the Lions. Dalvin Cook, his issue is he doesn't really get the receiving side of things, but against the Chargers, who are basically a run funnel, and he's likely to get 20 plus touches in this game, but he's also more likely to get 100 yards and a touchdown. So those are probably my 2 favorite. I think Jonathan Taylor he's been killing it recently.
And he's got the Jags.
He's got the Jags. Like, he wouldn't surprise me for him to do it again. But we've seen his downside. His downside seems way lower than others on this list.
Mm-hmm. I mean, they've been giving him more volume as of late, but you'd like to see it sustained through some period of time.
And not that this is like moving the needle, but I think Marlon Mack is going to be back this week, and they just, whenever Marlon Mack's out there, they give him like 3 to 5 touches, just no matter
for
what.
Some reason.
So that just takes away from Taylor and his upside. So that, I think, is something to note with that, where, Dalvin Cook, when healthy, I feel like they almost don't even care about Madison, but when he's out, like, Madison's a beast. But Madison had 4 carries last week. He had 2 carries the week before. So with Dalvin in there, he should get the bulk of the work. I didn't mention McCaffrey, but the issue I have with McCaffrey and cash is just he only played 29 snaps last week. What's crazy about that is he had 18 touches.
So it's like you're only going in when we're giving you the ball.
Right, which almost makes you feel like that much better. They're like, okay, we're just limiting how many times he's out there, but when he's out there, we're getting him.
Yeah, it's like we're only putting CMC out there unless he's touching the ball.
Yeah, so like he got 15 points in a game that he had 29 snaps. If that goes up to 50 snaps, then is that guaranteed 20 plus points? So that's where I think McCaffrey is really interesting in tournaments, but I don't think I can do it in cash just yet, even though like 8,400 for Christian McCaffrey when he was just
this could be the last time this could be the last time he's under 9,500. I mean, the rest of the year.
I think he was 10K like every game last year, and he was still like smashing. So that's the hard part for me, but I think this could be the lowest we'll see in ownership of Christian McCaffrey, especially if he comes out of this game with over 20 points. If he is under 9K again, he's just going to be a lock button.
Any other running back plays you want to touch on before I ask you for a pool of, let's say, 5 this week? Because I think 2 are absolute shoo-ins.
I really like Eckler. I think the fact that I'd say those other 3, the
play
Najee,
the running
Cook,
backs on both sides.
Taylor. Yeah, you could do that. Eckler coming off of last week where he was pretty chalky in what a lot of people considered a smash spot. He only had 3 receptions, so I think that limited him. But he did have 17 carries last week, and so he's in the spot again where I think if this game gets a little out of hand, he might get somewhat forgotten, especially since for only 300 more, you can have Najee. For 400 more, you can have Cook. For 500 more, you can have Taylor. And a lot of people will not really be talking themselves into playing Eckler, and you can afford those other guys. So I think Eckler's going to be somewhat under-owned. So I think in the way I'm trying to attack tournaments is I'd play Najee in cash and then fade him in tournaments. I'd play Eckler and McCaffrey in tournaments, like things like that. And then probably take a stand on someone like Taylor one way or the other.
Pool of 5 running backs. Lou, I'll start us off. Ingram, Dernis, hit me with the other 3.
I'll say McCaffrey, Cook, and Harris.
I like the call. You slid McCaffrey in there over Eckler. I'm surprised, but that is your pool. You can do with it as you wish. Moving to wide receivers, obviously we got to talk about Devontae at 79. Always going to be a factor. Always somebody that is going to be in play. And then another person I kind of want to talk about that I think is going to be a great value, similar range-ish, is going to be Mike Evans. Godwin is going to be a game-time decision. I think Evans is an absolute lock in the lineup if Godwin is to miss. So Evans 6,900. Talk about how you feel about that one, and then DA 79. He's always a pretty solid cash play. Thoughts on these 2?
Yeah. And just a quick point on what you said with McCaffrey. The reason I chose McCaffrey over Eckler is I think if he's going to be limited, he's also more likely to get touchdowns than Eckler, and like they're going to bring him in those scenarios.
Yeah, goal line, passing down.
For wide receiver, I think Adams is still going to be my favorite this week. He's such a beast, and even in a game where Jordan Love was his QB, like he still got 14 targets. So they're going to force feed him no matter who the QB is. And I mean, like I said, I'm expecting Rodgers to be back. Devontae Adams under 8K is always just a plug and play for me in general. It's kind of funny when these guys have games with like a backup quarterback, then all of a sudden their price comes down. So it's almost nice when they get those games.
Yeah, it is.
So Adams is probably my favorite. And then AJ Brown, I really like at 7,800. I prefer him over like a Justin Jefferson at 77. But McLaurin's pretty interesting too. Like 7,600 is kind of hefty for him because he is high variance. He's a guy that will get you under 10 points.
You'd love to see him at
30.
68 or 69, to be honest.
Yeah. I think I'd only play him in lineups that have Heineke because price-wise, like I don't know if you'd really be able to do it with a Brady lineup. Especially since with the Brady lineup, like I'm going to be playing Mike Evans in that lineup anyway. So that's a lot of salary in there. And then Diggs, I'd like to play some Allen Diggs teams. We still haven't seen like ceiling games from him.
Yeah, the pop-off games, yep.
But his floor is still about 15 points. So the likelihood, the only issue here is it's against the Jets. And what if they just get ahead early and don't really feel the need to pepper Diggs with targets? But what we've seen with the Bills, and they've been good this year, and it almost doesn't matter what the game script is. They're still going to just pass it. So I think I'd probably in that top tier, Adams, AJ, and then Diggs. If Julio were to not play, then I definitely would say AJ over over Diggs. But I think AJ is probably he's in a really good spot. It's just
And he's been playing
very
well.
expensive, and
Yep.
he's another guy who has high variance where if he goes off, he's like going off. But that's where in cash, like I wouldn't touch him. But I think in cash, Adams and then potentially Diggs, depending if you like don't want to play Adams because Rodgers isn't playing or something like that, and instead you go to Diggs, like I think that's fine. But there's just so many other plays below
Yep.
that I don't think you necessarily have to play Diggs, at least on cash.
And then we talked about this Vikings and Chargers game as a game that we want to attack. You kind of touched on Jeff, but let's talk about the other side of the ball. Keenan Allen at 7K and Mike Williams is coming back down to earth, but the usage is staying the same. The peripherals are good. He's at 66. Thoughts on Keenan Allen at 7 and Mike Williams at 66?
Yeah, I was talking to you about this before. That I really like Mike Williams this week. It's funny because people were not like giving shit to Keenan Allen, but they're talking like he doesn't have upside, this, that, and then he comes out and gets one of his 12 reception games where he gets over 100 yards and he had 25 fantasy points. He's kind of in the spot now. I think he's overpriced at 7K. His price had been coming up for the last few weeks, and now he's flipped. Mike Williams is something we talk about a lot. It happens with Evans and Godwin, happens with Lockett and DK Metcalf. It happens with Jefferson Thielen, where one of them they flip, right?
Yeah,
and right now, Keenan Allen is 400 more than Mike Williams, and Mike Williams is somewhat forgotten in a way, which is weird because it was only a few weeks ago where everyone's like, "Oh, he's the number one," like he's going off every week. But now he's had 3 straight games with 3 straight games with just 2 receptions. But we've seen him spike in over 10 targets a bunch this year, and he can go off for multiple touchdowns. And for 6,600, if he's getting forgotten because he has 3 straight weeks with less than 10 fantasy points in this game that I'm already trying to get exposure to in general, I really like Mike Williams this week at 6,600.
And then one other player that at least sticks out to me, I feel like we got to talk about, is we talked about Najee. Another guy there is Dante. I mean, we got Juju's out. Looks like Claypool's week to week. Looks like he's going to be out. So it's like there's not a lot there. I know Friarmuth's playing well. Probably going to see some James Washington. But at the end of the day, Dante Johnson is that dude. He is the guy that gets that volume, and we love that volume. I mean, like there's been a couple down games, but I mean, he has seen double-digit targets in all but 2 games that he's played in this year. So one was due to injury. He was out. So it's like it's just a lock at this point in time, and I'm feeling in my cash lineups Deontay at 68 with no Claypool around. It's feeling pretty good. I don't know if I have the stones to play him and Najee, but if I'm not playing Najee, I'm playing Deontay.
Yeah, I think you probably can play them together, but I do like the idea that it's almost like if you fade one, you want the other one in cash, especially. It's just such a great matchup, and it's a limited target tree. So I think when it comes down to it, like Deontay's like the perfect cash play, and he's in a great spot this week. He's at 6,800. There's a lot of other guys like an Adams who's also in a great spot. Mike Evans is 6,900, also in a great spot. Like I want to play all these guys, but you kind of have to pick and choose. I think I would fade Deontay in tournaments, and I would only really want to play him in cash because I think with that sort of ownership, his upside isn't the same as Mike Evans. I mean, we've seen it with Mike Evans with 3 touchdown games. So and he can go off for over 100 yards any given week too. So Mike Evans has like the same, if not higher upside than Devontae Adams, and he's $1,000 cheaper. So I'm probably assuming Godwin is out. It's pretty much a similar scenario for both of them, but I'd probably prefer Evans. But I think in cash right now, I'm trying to play both of them.
Yeah, it would be nice. Any other wide receivers you would like to touch on before I get to your pool?
Yeah, there are any guys in like the mid range? Like we really talked about like
Okay, yeah,
the 5K range. Like I don't know. There's like Pittman's at 6,300, and then under Pittman, like I don't know. It's not that nice looking.
So
like,
we talked
I look
about
down and I see here's the 2 guys that like popped out to me just like from looking. that Beasley and Landry are 52 and 5,100. They're both like not sexy plays, but if I were to like an Allen Beasley Diggs stack, it's kind of interesting to me.
Yeah, the Browns' passing attack is just so weak right now. I have a hard time. That's just not their brand, man. I mean, I thought about Jarvis last
There's
week.
no Odell.
Yeah, but that's what it was last week, and
There's
he had
no
like
Odell
freaking 2
last
catches.
week.
It didn't. I guess something I think is interesting is Jamison Crowder, kind of a stan, I know, but 4,800. I mean, Mike White is back, and we know he likes to pass the ball. I mean, this dude's going to throw the ball almost 40 times in this game. I know they got some. I think Tevin Coleman and Corey Davis are coming back, but the Bills leave the short side of the field open, and that's where Jamison Crowder operates. So, like an 8 for 80 is absolutely in play for Jamison Crowder, and then 2 cheap options if we needed to punt. We talked about James Washington likely needing to play. He's 3,500. See a world where he sees 4 or 5 targets. And then Tyler Johnson. So this is more of a deep GBP thought, but with Antonio Brown out, Gronkowski's out, and we talked about Godwin, especially if Godwin's out. Tyler Johnson at 33, I think is going to be a very popular play. But if Scotty Miller is off of IR, I am 100% team Scotty Miller over Tyler Johnson. I've seen it happen. I know there's rapport there with Brady. I think he's a better wide receiver. So if for some reason Godwin is out, and there's a lot of ifs, a lot up in the air, but if Godwin is out and Scotty Miller is healthy, I'd be more obliged to play Scotty Miller over Tyler Johnson.
Yeah, I think that's a cool thought because a lot of people are talking up Tyler Johnson right now, especially with the Godwin news. So I think no one's going to want to do it, and that's where you're going to get that leverage. And I probably wouldn't do it like as a one-off, but I would do it in a Brady lineup.
Yep.
Because you're really hoping for that like 40-yard touchdown or better, and then as long as he outscores Tyler Johnson, and I think for him to get a touchdown, that's really where you're going for. And they do like to throw the ball deep to Scotty Miller, so I like that call. When you're looking like really deep down, I think it's kind of tough this week. We haven't talked much about the Cardinals, but if Hopkins is out and
I'm planning on
and
it.
Moore is like somewhat injured, like Christian Kirk 5,500. He threw a touchdown last week, didn't he? So like it was not that you expected to ever do that again, but 6 catches for 90 yards last week, and we've seen his upside in touchdowns, and he hasn't really hit. He has one game with 100 yards this year, but I think if Hopkins were to be out and Rondale Moore is somewhat banged up, I don't really hate that. And I think if you're going to do like mini correlations like that with CMC, I'm kind of looking at that right now.
Any other wide receivers you want to chat about before we get to the pool, Lou?
No, it's a kind of just play based off of what you're doing with your quarterback, I think, because the running backs are really where people are going to make and break, I think, this week.
All right, pool of 5. This is a tough one, Lou. Pool of 5 wide receivers.
For me, it's Adams, Evans, Mike Williams, and Dante Johnson, and I'm going to say Pittman is my other one.
I like it. I like the call. Moving to tight ends. I think the obvious one that fits just with how we're restructuring things off the bat, going to start with Dan Arnold. He got traded midseason there, and took him a little bit to settle in. But I mean, he's since he's been there, like I think the last 4 games he's been leading the Jags in targets. He's actually over the last 2 weeks has more targets, receptions, and yards than any other tight end. They're just using him a lot. They traded for him for a reason, and they're using him. So in my mind, Dan Arnold at 3,500 with the usage that he's getting is an absolute smash. 3,500 thoughts on Arnold and maybe another one in there, Lou.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like last week I kept telling myself, I was like, I don't know, do I want to play him? Was it a fluke the week before? And we just saw it again last week, and he hasn't really gotten too much work in the red zone compared to what we like to see with tight ends. But for 3,500, he's getting the volume. So he's got a lot better floor than some of these other guys. He is going to be highly owned. And then the big discussion this week is like Arnold versus Friarmuth. We've been talking about this in pretty much this whole show, but for the Steelers, they without Chase Claypool, like that's going to have a lot more targets
Red
out
zone.
there.
Where's the red zone looks?
Friarmuth, it's another one of those things where he went off in a primetime game, so he's like the hot topic right now. He had 2 touchdowns on Monday night, and they're facing the Lions. So I think he's going to be seen in a lot of lineups, and it seems like he's doing well for them. And Ebron's out, so is Ebron supposed to be coming back? I think I read something that it was potential.
Yep, I haven't looked. I haven't thought about playing Friarmuth
so
yet. So
he fully participated in practice. So if Ebron's back, that does somewhat hurt Friarmuth. But I think after his Monday night performance and just the fact that him and Arnold are very closely priced, I could see him getting a lot of ownership. But that's where go back to my guy Tyler Conklin. I could go back to him. He's 3,400. He seems to just get like 5 catches for 40, 50 yards every week. And that's okay for a tight end. Maybe he gets a touchdown. The Chargers have been good against wide receivers, but they haven't been as good against tight ends. So I like Conklin against those other 2. And then Ricky Seals-Jones, 3,700, also similar price.
Always. RSJ always. Yep.
Assuming that there's no Thomas, which based on the reports this week, it doesn't seem like he's going to play. Like he hasn't come off of the injury reserve yet, but I could see people playing him in a game against the Bucks that, like we said earlier, Heineke could end up having to throw a bunch. So it's interesting this week that there's really like there's 3 to 4 options in that sub 4K range that almost makes the guys that are more expensive that much nicer looking. I mean, I don't know.
They're 58
trying to pay up? Yeah, 58 is Pitts. That's the thing is there's no Kelsey, there's no Waller on the slate, so it's not like you have to pay up for someone and doesn't.
You're not paying
generally
7K. You're not paying 7K. Yeah, you're not paying 7K for a tight end right now.
I mean, Pitts has that upside. He's shown, but
yeah, I don't know. Like Hawkinson, it's tough to trust. Schultz. I mean, I think Gallup is back, so I have a little bit of, pause there, a little bit of caution. Dallas Goedert, I hate this game. I think this is just 2 run-heavy teams that I think are going to try to run the ball. This could just get ugly. And I'm not really playing Ertz. Like Dawson Knox, like coming off of the hand, I want to wait and see. So I don't know. There's just nothing that really excites me about these top guys. I think, going to Pitts at 58 could make some sense, but for cash – I'm just more going to go with like what I think I know, and that's going to be Dan Arnold.
Yeah, I agree. And I think if it might have been different if Ebron was still out, I think that helps the reasoning to not play Friarmuth, but I think he'll be pretty owned. And if he's going to be like 15% plus owned in this week, then I'm probably fine to just fade him coming off of 2 touchdown games. So that's probably what I'll end up doing with Friarmuth. But I get why people will play him, but at the same time, I probably will just stay away.
Pool of 3 tight ends might be rough for you here.
Yeah, so I'm thinking Arnold and Conklin. I'm going to do the Conklin instead of Friarmuth. We didn't talk about Gronk is going to be out. I don't think I'm going to play, but if I'm going to choose between the 2, it would be Howard over Brait.
Brait, you're just hoping for a touchdown. Howard can actually get you some yards and a touchdown.
Yeah. And then I could see myself playing Kyle Pitts just as like the pay up to be contrarian idea. And in lineups where I have like a Dak Prescott.
Moving to defense before we get out of here. Again, it's really just what fits, but looking at some of the cheaper options here, I think like one that pops out to me is going to be the Titans against the Saints. We know Simeon's going to be starting. Titans have been playing well as of late. The Saints probably aren't going to score a lot, and this game only has a 44-point implied total. So I think at 27, if you can fit it, the Titans are a pretty nice one for me at the very least. I think Cardinals at 37 is obviously great, but you got to pay for it. Other thoughts on defense before we get out of here, Lou?
Yeah, the other side of that game, I kind of like the Panthers, especially if Kyler ends up sitting, then I like them even more. People will go to the Titans. That's going to be pretty common with Trevor Siemian, and then Seahawks. I think could be interesting if Rodgers were to not play. You're saying before that you kind of like the Lions a little bit. I
I
don't
just
hate
think the
that play
game could get.
either.
Yeah, I think it just could get ugly. Like I'm not kidding you. Like Big Ben is so washed. Like
Yeah,
he had to absolutely throw. He had to put 110% into like a 40-yard toss last week. I get that you could probably dink and dunk with Najee and Deontay, but like I just don't see this game like in an offensive shootout. I don't see things getting out of hand offensively in this game. I mean, Vegas doesn't either. It's a 42.5 point over under. I mean, I don't know. It's not like I think that there's a lot of like sacks or maybe an interception. I'm not trying to predict that, but I just think it could be a pretty ugly game, and it could be a pretty safe play.
I don't hate the Browns at 2,800. I kind of like them. There's only one game this year that they didn't have at least 2 sacks. They haven't really given up many points, especially as of late. They haven't given up 20 points in 4 weeks. And they're facing Mac Jones, who's rookie quarterback, but they are at home, and I could just see this game being one that's like another one of their 14-10 type games. So I kind of like the Browns in that mid range. Like you said, if you can afford it and get up, like the Cardinals are pretty solid against PJ Walker, and then the Bucks aren't that bad either at 3,500 against Heineke. I don't know. It's another one of those weeks where it's like depending on what you have left, like
Just what fits, man.
you have options. Yeah.
Yep. All right, final thoughts on week 10, man.
Yeah, get your running backs correct because that's where the money's going to be made this week. Yeah, I think pay attention to news because we've already seen a lot of news so far this week. But there's a couple interesting things that I'd be paying attention to. Is Godwin is the important injury. I think Claypool's already been ruled out, and then there's a couple like these running backs that we've been talking about. Check to see if who their backups are. Kind of like what we were saying with Ingram. If it's going to be Montgomery being his backup versus Washington being his backup, like that could affect their touchdown upside or their pass catching upside. So pay attention to who backups are going to be in these running back situations. And if we hear any more news on like McCaffrey getting more work this week or something like that, like just it's going to be an important news week, I think.
All right, Lou, where can I find you on Twitter and where can I find your work, man?
Yeah, at Ludog Sherman now on Twitter, at Lucky Trader, doing some NFTs with them. So yeah, I've been streaming a bunch this week, so definitely check it out if you're interested in either that or fantasy football.
Find me on Twitter at FFTylerO. That's all we have today, folks. Don't forget, tell somebody you love them.